Good morning. Today is 9 March, the year 2024. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. Today, I'm here at the museum along with fellow volunteers, Diane Thompson and Mike Stone. And today we have the honor and the privilege of hearing the story of Machinist Mate First Class Gene Stone. Machinist Mate Stone was a PBY flight engineer and aircraft commander in the Pacific during World War II and a Pearl Harbor survivor. Machinist Mate Stone passed away several years ago, but his son Mike is here with us today, and so he will be filling us in on his dad's life, particularly during World War II. Mike, really good to have you here again.
Nice being here.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mike, first of all, would you please state and spell your dad's full name?
Eugene Earl Stone.
And
He
go ahead.
passed away 2 days, I take that back, 3 days before his 95th birthday.
Yeah. And where was he born?
December 9th, 1922.
Okay, and where was that?
He was born in Santa Monica, California.
Okay. And we talked a little bit earlier, but how did he end up in Santa Monica, his ancestors that you know of?
Well, his ancestors, same as mine, they've been in the country since 1675.
Right.
But they did make their way out to the West Coast.
Came from England, I believe you said, probably.
Yes, they came from England.
Yeah, okay.
And my grandfather was born, my dad's father, was born in Denison, Texas. I don't have the exact date. Actually, I do, but I don't remember what it is. Anyway, old age. And he made his way to the West Coast in the early 1900s. Basically San Diego, and then they moved up the coast and settled in Los Angeles, Hollywood, actually. And
What did he do?
he was a gaffer for MGM Studios.
Really?
Head electrician, Sparky.
So in the silent era, did he start with them? Or
Started in the silent era, and then they went into the talkies, and he passed away in 1957, so he was seriously involved with the talkies.
Yeah.
And because of his position, he met several of the well-known movie stars of the 30s and 40s into the 50s. And so did my dad.
And let's see, you were born, what year were you born?
I was born 1946.
So did you get to go to the studios at all?
I did, but I don't remember them because I was so little.
Yeah.
I do remember one of the actors that I actually met at my grandparents' house for dinner, Maurice Chevalier.
Oh, really?
Very nice man. But it used to drive my dad and I crazy because my grandmother and he would sit there and talk in French.
Oh.
But that's okay.
That was pretty cool, yeah. So, where did your dad go to school?
High school for him was Hollywood High for the first 3 years, and then they moved from Hollywood down to Manhattan Beach, and he finished high school at Redondo Beach Union High School. Mm-hmm. And shortly thereafter, he decided to join the Navy.
So what year did he graduate from high school then?
1941.
Okay. So he joined before Pearl Harbor, obviously.
Yes.
He did.
He joined the Navy in June 1st, actually,
Okay.
1941.
And do you know why he decided to do that?
He loved aircraft and he loved the ocean. So he took a shot and joined the Navy and got what he was looking for.
Did he do any surfing when he was a kid?
Yes, he did. Back then they were called paddle boards. Yes, he was a surfer and a fish. He loved to fish, which growing up we did a lot of.
Where in Hollywood area did he live when they lived there?
I don't have
Not sure.
the exact location. I know it was Hollywood proper.
Yeah. Okay. So where did he take his boot camp?
He took boot camp at San Diego, and from San Diego he went to Naval Air Training Center in Alameda, and when he completed that he went to the Naval Air Training Center in Chicago. And
That was different than Great Lakes?
pardon me?
Was it different than Great Lakes? A different location?
Yeah, well, Great Lakes.
In
They
that
just
same
call it
area.
Chicago. It was the Great Lakes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And had he any experience with aviation before he went into the Navy at all?
He didn't do any flying until he went into the service, but he did, like me, built model airplanes. And I can remember seeing some of the planes that he built. They were free flight and they were huge. They were big. But he always had an interest in aviation.
And did they fly? Did he have those kind?
Yes, they did. They were the type you started the engine and launched it and prayed. They were on their own.
So, okay, so then from Great Lakes, where did he go then?
From Great Lakes, he went back to San Diego, was assigned to VP 24.
At North Island?
North Island. And shortly thereafter, they transferred to Pearl Harbor.
And what planes did they have in their outfit?
To begin with, they had a PBY-4, which is a Catalina. The difference is the PBY-4 did not have the blisters on the sides. That was, they were installed on the 5. Shortly after arriving in Pearl Harbor, they did change aircraft. They went from the 4 to the PBY-5.
Did they fly over or did they ship them
They
over?
flew over.
How long did it take to get there? Would you guess?
Well, let's see, 3,000 miles in a 100-mile-an-hour airplane. He said it took about 26 hours to fly, to make the flight over.
And how many on the crew?
Pardon me?
How many in the crew?
They had 8 in the crew for the flight across the Pacific. After they got there, it was usually 8. Sometimes they'd have 10. The reason for the 10 is they had an extra pilot and co-pilot on board.
And what was basically their purpose, the PBY?
Search and rescue primarily. They would
I guess PB
Search
is
patrol.
patrol bomber. or-
patrol bomber. Y is for the consolidated. And the 5 model is strictly a seaplane, had beaching gear. Had to manhandle the thing to get it in the water or out.
And the other ones, were they seaplanes too?
Yes,
The earlier
all
ones?
of them were seaplanes. The
And did they have any amphibs?
They did, after Pearl Harbor was attacked, because they lost so many aircraft, they did receive the A model Catalina, which is an amphibian. And they had both the 5 and the 5A, and they got a hold of some other unit out in the Solomons and traded their 5s for 5As because they preferred to have the landing gear. It wasn't as fast as a 5, but it worked.
But they did have some armament and some bombing capabilities.
Yes, they could carry up to 4,000 pounds of bombs, torpedoes, depth charges. They had a .30 caliber machine gun in the nose. They had 2 50s, one in each blister, and there was a .30 caliber in the tunnel, which is underneath the aircraft.
So where was his station on the plane then usually?
Primarily as flight engineer, he was in the pylon that the wing sits on top of. And I've been in there. It's a tight squeeze. It's hard to get into, but you can control all the engines and everything from that position. And as time went by, everybody on the crew, save one, which was a navigator, they had to learn to fly the airplane. So they all got flight time, became qualified. Other than as flight engineer, he was also the bombardier. And he'd be up in the nose of the aircraft, in the bow, because they are boats basically. And if he wasn't in a bombardier position, he was still up there with a machine gun.
They had enough fuel to get from San Diego to Pearl?
They carried enough fuel to fly for 30 hours. And normal cruise speed on a PBY was 110 miles an hour.
Have you ever been up in one?
Nope. I've been in one a long, long time ago, but I've never had the opportunity to fly in one.
You know what we should do is, I'm not sure where is our PBY now?
It's still down in restoration.
In restoration. Maybe after we finish, we'll go down and go around it, and you can talk a little bit about it then too.
That'd be good.
Yeah. So what month did they get into Pearl?
They got into Pearl August. They were actually there by August.
They were at Ford Island, and what did they do for the next 3 or 4 months?
Whatever they were told.
Aircraft
maintenance.
Were they flying any patrol at that time?
But it's in his logbooks. They call it a training mission.
Training mission, yeah.
And they would go out and they'd fly around the islands, go to a few other locations, but primarily around the islands.
And then, did he ever say whether, when they were heading over there, that there was any thoughts that we might get into it with the Japanese?
The thought was there, but everybody was more concerned with the war in Europe that was going on in England.
Right, yeah.
Not much thought was given to the Japanese by my dad or anybody else on the crew, as far as he said.
Did he get some R&R while he was over there during that first few months?
Yes, he did.
Probably enjoyed that.
A lot of surfing, a lot of the food, chasing girls, because he was single at the time.
Yeah. And, I guess we should back up. Did he have any brothers and sisters?
I had one brother, my Uncle Don, who joined the Navy after he graduated from high school.
Was he younger or older?
He's a little bit younger.
And his mom, your grandmother, what was her name?
Isabelle Blanchard.
French?
Yes, she was French.
That's why she could speak. That's why she and Maurice got along so well. Huh?
I thought that Grandma was born in Nice, and several years ago I discovered the truth. Her mother was pregnant when they left France and came to the United States, to Ellis Island, like a lot of people did, and my grandmother was actually born in New York.
Oh.
So the truth is out.
And your grandfather, what was his name?
Earl Cecil Stone.
Okay. And so they're there, and so Sunday morning, December 7th comes along, then what?
Well, they were coming off the USS Curtis, heading for breakfast when the Japanese attacked. And
They were coming off of what?
The USS Curtis, which is a seaplane tender.
Oh, okay.
It was in the harbor.
Okay.
They had just
So the planes were on
their aircraft were
on the. They were not on Ford Island.
Oh, they were on Ford Island.
Oh, okay.
4 of their airplanes were actually out on patrol.
Okay.
The rest of them were on the apron out or inside one of the hangars.
But your dad was on the Curtis because that's where
Their seaplane tender.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, why was he there? Is that where they worked on?
That's where they bunked. That's where they slept.
That's what.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And anyway, the Japanese started their attack, and everybody ran for cover, trying to find some kind of a weapon. I've actually seen video, and it's out there, of his particular plane taking a direct bomb hit and up in pieces. So everybody did what they had to do. Tend to the wounded, try to shoot down the airplanes that were coming in at them. All hell broke loose, is the way they put it, and it really did. And the next 48 hours, everybody was on guard. Getting new weapons in, trying to get some of the aircraft back to flight readiness.
They have, did they lose any of their people?
They lost one of their crew during the attack. And he was wounded, and he passed away in the hospital. Just wasn't going to survive it.
Yeah.
But my dad was lucky; he was unscathed during the attack.
Yeah.
He did get wounded later when they were out on a patrol. After Pearl Harbor, they were transferred out to French frigate shoals because Japanese submarines were supposed to be in the area.
Where in relation to Hawaii was that?
To the west, a little bit southwest, I believe. My geography might be a little bit off. But they did spot what they thought was a submarine, and they dropped depth charges on it and killed a whale.
So how far from Hawaii is
French frigate?
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I know it was quite a flight from them.
Okay, so it wasn't right there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a ways off.
Okay. And so how long was it before they went there? Did they stay around?
It was 2 weeks after the attack on Pearl
Okay.
Harbor. It was when they transferred out.
Yeah.
And they were at French frigate for 3 weeks, I believe it was. And then they went down to the Solomons.
How many planes? Well, how many in their was the VP?
VP-24.
How many? What was the complement of that to start with?
8.
And how did they, you said they lost at least one? How many did they lose? Do you know?
Well, they actually lost 3 aircraft, but they were replaced. This is where the PBY-5A came in.
Okay.
And they did take the 8 aircraft down to French frigate.
Okay.
French frigate
Okay.
shoal,
Mm-hmm.
and from there they went down to the Solomons, and all 8 of the aircraft went down there, and that was in preparation for the assault on Guadalcanal.
Right.
So I don't have the exact time frame on all of this.
Yeah.
I wish I'd have brought
Were
the
they
log
at, like
book.
Espiritu Santo? Is that where they?
Pardon?
Espiritu
Santos. That's where they went,
Right. Yeah.
and from there they went to Midway. And in the flight, PBYs that were looking for the Japanese fleet for the Midway invasion, they had 3 of them. 3 of the PBYs were theirs.
Yeah. That movie Midway really shows that a lot.
Yes, it does. It wasn't their plane that
Strawberry,
spotted it.
Strawberry 5 or something like that was the one that.
They were heading in a different direction.
Oh, were they? Okay. Now, were they on Midway when the Japanese attacked?
They had left
They,
because they knew they were coming in.
so
They
they were
had-
out on patrol, or they had gone.
They were on patrol. And their patrols would last anywhere from 24 to 30 hours. Once you took a PBY up, you were going to be gone for a while.
Now, did the Curtis follow them up there?
Yes, it did. Actually, it did.
And what does it look like? The Curtis. I mean,
The Curtis-
tender. Is it a flat kind
Yeah.
of thing or what?
The after section is flat, and it has 2 cranes on it, one on each side, where they could pick up. The PBY would land, come alongside. The crane would lift the aircraft up and set it on the deck, and they do whatever repairs is necessary, and then put her back in the water. And it looked like primarily a supply ship the bridge and everything was far forward on the hull, and the after deck was primarily flat. They could put 3 PBYs on it. They tried to put a PBM Mariner on it, and it didn't work. The ship would fall over.
Because it's so big.
Yeah, it's a bigger airplane.
Yeah, right. So, obviously, Midway was quite a battle, and so did he realize that the importance of that battle at the time?
Yes, he did. And in some of his memoirs, he does admit that during the entire time he was in the Pacific, he was scared.
Yeah.
Afraid for his life. But it's like a lot of people, it's them or us. So they did what they had to do.
Yeah.
And one of the missions, after Midway, I believe it was on Tulagi, they had to go in to rescue some Marines and get them out of there. They landed in a bay, couldn't get up to the shoreline because of the coral shoal. So they put the rubber boats into the water, went ashore, and on the way back, their aircraft was being strafed, and the pilot got out of there. He took the airplane up. Came back 2 days later and rescued them because they'd gotten some Marines into the rubber boats to get them out to the BBY. And when the attack hit, they all went back ashore. And they asked the Marines, is there something we can do? And said, yeah, grab a helmet and a gun and start shooting. So, but they did. They got out of there. 2 of the Marines were wounded, but they survived. Not someplace I'd want to be.
No. So, after Midway, where did they go?
They went, oh my God, I'm trying to remember here. Do you mind?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Memoirs. After Midway, they returned to Pearl Harbor after Midway. Then they went out to the Solomon Islands. From there to Espiritu Santos. They did a little time on Guadalcanal. They weren't on Guadalcanal very long. And from that point, oh Lord, where is it? They wound up fighting for the islands of New Georgia, Rendova, Bougainville, New Britain, and Tulagi.
And where did he get wounded?
He got wounded. They were attacked. It was a head-on attack by a Japanese fighter. Everybody calls it a Zero. It might have been, may not have been. But he was in the bow gun, and he fired directly into the engine of the thing, and it blew up. Oh. And a piece of shrapnel came through the front and into his leg. So he was transferred back to Pearl in the hospital, and then once he was better, he was reassigned, and back they went. Do a little more damage. Yeah. The other incident they had, they were on patrol, and they were below clouds, and all of a sudden, out of the cloud cover, came a Japanese Betty, a Japanese bomber, close enough where they were in gun range. So all of a sudden, the PBY and a Japanese bomber got in a dogfight. And everybody got it cut loose with the guns. And they were lucky. They shot down the Betty.
Really?
The last thing they saw was it heading for the ocean. And one of the other, one of the gunners on the PBY was wounded. Not bad, but he was wounded. Yeah. And after Tulagi, they were reassigned back to Pearl Harbor, and they had to make one other, what they called a training mission, for 3 weeks, and then they came back to Pearl. And by that time, the war was coming to a close. They'd all done their time in, and it was time for them to come home. During that during all that in the Pacific, VP-24 became VPB-24, because VP-24 started flying B-24s,
Oh,
PB-4Ys,
right.
and that's about it.
Did he come back on a PBY?
No, they actually came home on a boat. Their final aircraft, which was a PBY-5B model, the difference between it and an A, it didn't have any landing gear, it just had bigger engines. It's a little bit faster. Their aircraft was so beat up that it was flagged for destruction, destroy it, tear it up. So they put them on a boat and brought them home.
Did he talk about any of his crew members, his crewmates, how they get along with each other? Did he keep in contact with any of them when he came back?
Honestly, I don't know. He did join an organization in, I believe, the 70s. It was members of PBY units from all over the United States. And they'd all get together once every 6 months. And he did remember some of the guys. And through the years, they just kind of passing away.
Yeah. So he was not married while he was over there.
When he was during the war, he wasn't married. When he finally came home, which was early 1945. He and my mother did get married.
And was he still in the Navy then?
He was still active in the Navy, coming back stateside. They went into San Francisco, and he transferred back down to San Diego as a, what do you call him, a drill sergeant? Training recruits, one of which was his brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Uncle Don had a hard time.
I would. And where did you meet your mom?
Actually, they met in Chicago, and I never been able to figure out what was she doing in Chicago, because she was born in Sacramento and they were living in Oakland. That's where it was. They met in Oakland when he came back stateside.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and then he went back to Chicago. He went to school for the Martin Mars, the big seaplane, because he wanted a larger aircraft. And she took a train, went back to Chicago, and that's where they got married.
Oh, okay. And what was her name and her maiden name?
Joyce Edith Barnett.
And what about her ancestors, or do you know anything about them?
The only thing I know about her mother and father, my grandpa Jim was from Wales. Now my grandmother Hazel, really don't know where she was from, and I've done research like I did with my family, and I can't find anything on her. So she liked to keep it secret.
And so did your dad stay in the Navy?
He stayed in the Navy until 1947. Then he kind of resigned. His time was up.
Yeah.
He didn't like what was going on. So we were living in San Diego during this time.
What part of San Diego?
He and my grandfather, Jim, had 2 gas stations down in San Diego. That's where he was working, and we were going to move to Northridge, San Fernando Valley. In the meantime, my dad got a job with Lockheed because the PBY was being replaced by the P-2V, Neptune. So working for Lockheed, he was working at night at Lockheed, putting together the Neptunes. And then he was up here for the week, and he'd go back down for the weekend, work in the gas stations until they bought a house in Tarzana. out in the valley. And he kept working for Lockheed, and he went to school for Northrop Tech to further his education, get his certifications. And along the way, he was picked up by North American Aviation as a technical representative. He was in Englewood for a year, and then they stuck him over in Europe. 4 years. He'd come home for 2 weeks every year, and then back to Germany.
Did your family get to go over there at all?
The North Americans said that the family could go, but my mother said absolutely not. We're staying here. So we stayed in the States. Well, Dad was out having fun. I mean, doing his job for North American.
When you were living in San Diego, what part of San Diego with those gas stations, and where was you living?
The gas stations were in San Diego proper. We actually lived in Lemon Grove.
Okay.
And I can still remember the house.
Yeah.
Because growing up, being in that location, Consolidated was building the B-36. And they would literally fly over the house. And the house would shake. I have very vivid memories of that. And while we were there, that's where my interest in aviation came about, because I got to go down to the Navy base there at North Island. And my first airplane was a TBM Avenger. And the next one was a PBY. And because Dad flew them, that was his airplane, I still today love the PBY.
Yeah,
It's my favorite.
So then he finished his career with North American?
He stayed with North American up until 1975. By that time it had become Rockwell International. And he took an early retirement from that. And from there he went into the plastics industry. His career with North American, years later I found out what his job actually was. He was an aeronautical engineer, but his primary interest was power plants, jet engines and rocket engines. He was with North American. Once he was back here in the States, he went with Rocketdyne, which is a division, and was involved with development of the rocket engines and support systems. So you had, other than the F-100, which was the primary airplane that he was a rep on, became the X-15. He was with that program for a number of years. Then he went with the B-70, the Valkyrie. He was on that project. Nice airplane. And then he went into the aerospace division, which would be Autonetics and Rocketdyne, so he was back and forth with them. And then he made the transfer down to Mississippi to the test facility. And like a dummy, I went with him. Oh, it was good. It was good. And once the test facility was activated, he transferred back to Seal Beach and settled in Westminster.
Did you say, were they working on the Apollo down there?
Yes, sir.
He was too?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Even though Boeing built the booster, Rocketdyne built the engines for it. He was instrumental in developing the test stands where we could lock these things up and fire them off.
So of all the different aircraft and rockets and things that came out of him being able to work on that, what was his greatest love or his greatest accomplishment? Not his accomplishment necessarily, but the overall accomplishment that happened from him being part of it.
The B-70.
Now, what's the B-70? I'm not
The
familiar.
Valkyrie, the Mach 3 bomber.
Okay.
Back in the late 50s, early 60s, North American was building that. The Air Force was looking at it. And a high altitude, very fast bomber. Delta design with a canard up front, 6 engines. I won't go into the whole story because I did learn.
Jet engines or?
It was jet engines.
Okay.
And she was intended to cruise at 75,000 feet at Mach 3.1, and it was capable. But due to government funding, politics, the program was canceled. One of the B-70s crashed, the other one, the only survivor, is at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Have you seen it? Have you been there to Wright-Pat?
I've seen the B-70 up close and personal. I was very, very lucky. At the right place at the right time. And trust me, that is a big airplane. Gorgeous. People think it's ugly, but I think it's gorgeous. Looks like a cobra sitting there waiting to strike.
So, what did your dad have any other interests besides aviation?
Race cars when he was younger,
Oh, yeah?
and motorcycles when he was younger.
Did he have a race car?
He and my grandfather had a few of them.
Oh, they did.
Dirt track.
Oh, yeah.
Not a jalopy, but what would you call it?
Midgets?
Midgets.
Oh, yeah, right.
midgets.
That was really big.
It
And
was.
some good Indy 500 came from the midgets, had driven midgets out here. I know a couple guys that won the Indy 500 had started out. I've been trying to think. Bill Vukovich, I think, was one of the guys, as I recall.
Yeah, back with his midget days, the Indy or the Offenhauser was the one to beat. So he and my grandfather, and I saw one of them. They drug one around for a while. They take a Buick straight 8, cut it in half, turn it into a 4-cylinder, and it could run with an Offenhauser
Really?
for a while.
Did you go to any of the races?
No, I was too young to go to any of the races, but I do remember the cars.
Probably dirt track.
Yeah, dirt track. Yeah. And fishing. Deep sea fishing was a big passion for my dad.
Did you ever go with him?
Yeah, in fact, we had several adventures. We'd go out of Santa Barbara or out of Long Beach or Redondo Beach. A couple times out of San Diego. It was my dad, my grandfather, and me. And I remember several occasions. I enjoyed it. It was really fun between the two of them.
Where was your dad living when he passed away?
He was living in Westminster, and he, hate to think about it, but it's a fact of life. He had gotten to the point where he would fall a lot. He was becoming very frail. There was a lot of things that he wanted to do, but he just physically could not. And my stepmother, it actually got to the point where she could no longer take care of him. My little brother would come over and try to help out. And one day he had an issue and he wound up in the hospital, the VA in Long Beach. And we all got together and discussed the situation. And it was decided to put him in hospice at the VA. And he was there for a little over 6 months. And I'd never seen the guy more happy. My brother and I had to go visit. Sometimes Maggie would be there, taking turns. And you walk into his room, and he'd get this big grin on his face, hide the box of C's candy that he wasn't supposed to be eating. Always giving the nurses a bad time. They loved it.
Oh, well, that was a good way to go, I guess.
And then I went in one day. Brother was already there, and we were talking, visiting with Dad. And then my brother had to run home, but he was going to be coming back. In the meantime, I went back home. By the time I got there, my brother was back at the hospital, and I got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning that to get to the hospital. And Dad passed away just before I got there, about half an hour.
That sounds like you spent some quality time with him the last few months.
Yeah, it was sad to see because you always remember what they were. And I still look back and I see it and I think about it. And
I think you had mentioned when I was talking to you before, your dad was somewhat of a disciplinarian.
very much so. Very much so.
Any examples?
Well, I guess once you're a my God. Yeah. Once you become a instructor or a drill sergeant, so to speak, even though he was Navy, that stays with you. And when we moved to Manhattan Beach in 1960, after my mother passed away, it was my dad, my grandfather, and those 3 kids. And we all had our chores to do. And it was, you do it right, or you're going to pay the consequences. I was on restriction a lot. That was a bad kid. But he would make up a list of chores for all of us to do. Because I was the oldest, I learned how to mop floors really well. And what he would do with the chore list is every week he would switch. So I would have this list, my sister had this list, my brother had this list, and then it would change, except for swabbing the deck. And that was always on my list. And if we did it, even if we hated it, because we knew we were going to be in trouble if we didn't do it. And he stuck to it. But at the same time, he was fun to be with, fun to do things with. I learned a lot from him. And as a teenager in high school, when I finally got into cars, I realized if there was a problem with an engine, talk to Dad. He won't say anything, he'll just go fix it. He'll take a screwdriver and a crescent wrench, and it's done, it's running perfect. He was an engine man. No doubt about it. He knew engines inside and out. And I have a lot of fond memories. Even if I was in trouble a lot, none of it was bad. I tried to get away with things and it just wasn't going to work.
And I think you had mentioned that you think that helped you a lot when you went into the service and into your basic training.
Yes, he did. When we were actually living in Mississippi, when I got a letter from our friends and neighbors to report to the induction center in Los Angeles. We're in Mississippi. So I wrote them a letter, said, no, can't do it. So there was a time frame in there where nothing went on. But my dad had mentioned, because he knew my love of aviation, he found out about the warrant program for the Army, doing helicopters. Looked into it. Okay, I'm ready to sign up. Let's do this. So I went down to the recruiting station in Gulfport, Mississippi, and we filled out a lot of paperwork. Didn't sign anything yet, and they sent me up to Jackson, Mississippi for written exams. Check do all the knowledge stuff. And that was all fine and dandy. The Army was grinning because they knew they had me. And then from there, I went to Allen Chandler Naval Air Station in New Orleans and got a naval flight physical. 18 years old, how can it go wrong? Well, my color vision is off a little bit. It's slight, very slight red-green deficiency. And the doctors at the naval base said, we can give you a waiver, but if you fail the color exam anytime during your training, you're done, you're washed out. And what that meant was I'm stuck for 5 years in the Army. at the beginning of Vietnam. And tear it up, throw it away, oh, let them draft me, and which they did from Gulfport. And I wound up going in. But because boot camp, basic training for me wasn't that big a deal because of my father, with his influence on my growing up, had me in a mindset where this is the Army. We could do this. It's going to be for my benefit. And if I end up going to Vietnam, I have a better chance of surviving. And fortunately for me, I wound up going into an aviation unit in Germany, not Vietnam, as an aviation machinist. So yes, and once I was in Germany, my dad gave me a couple ideas on how to play a game with the Army, which paid off. No bad memories.
Okay, well, I think we're about ready to wind up. Any parting thoughts about your dad?
I miss him. Yeah, there was a lot of time we didn't have together, but the time we did have was precious.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing with us. I know it wasn't that easy for you, and but if your dad was here, I certainly would thank him for his service, and thank you for raising somebody like you and the family. And so thanks again. Really
Thank
glad
you.
to have you aboard. And we'll go downstairs and go around that PBY and
Okay.
take a few shots here too.
Okay. My dad's primary job was up in the pylon as a flight engineer, making sure those big engines kept running right. Other than that, he would be in the bow as a bombardier or nose gunner back when the PBYs had the turret up front.
Show me again up here. Where would he be?
Well, if you look, see that little window?
Oh, right.
Okay, he'd be right on the other side of that
Uh-huh.
on a chair that's actually suspended from the bottom of the wing. And you had all the controls for the engines right up there.
And what kind of engines did they use?
Pratt & Whitney 1830s, 1,200 horsepower. The first ones were rated at 900, but they improved them, made them a little bit better. The last model, the 6, the BBY 6, still had the 1830 Pratt & Whitneys, but they were rated at 1,400 horsepower. And they had a taller tail on them because of the bigger engines.
Yeah.
But basically the same airplane.
Where were the gas tanks?
In the wings.
Oh,
This entire center section is fuel.
yeah. And you said a lot.
Yeah, a lot. Well, enough. Both engines leaned out at, I believe they were turning 2,200 RPM. This airplane could fly for 30 hours. It's a long time to be bouncing around in the sky.
Right. Yeah. And you said the crew, 8 to 10 in the crew.
8 to 10
and so
normally.
who would be where in the crew?
Yes, 2 would be rare. That was for a long distance when they're
No,
really.
no, I mean, where would the various crew members be stationed?
They'd probably be in the back sleeping in the bunks. This airplane did have a galley
Oh.
and it had sleeping quarters, 2 at a time.
If they had to go into battle or something like that, then where would they have some gunners and stuff like that?
You had two individuals that were primarily the blister gunners,
Right.
observation, and would switch positions. The navigator was the sole individual. He would take a position on a gun if he had to.
Oh, okay. And there was one in the bow, you said.
was one in the
And they
bow.
were all 30 calibers?
The one in the bow initially was a 30 caliber. They did upgrade later. Well, I believe it was a Bolton turret that they put up there, had a 50 caliber,
Okay.
which gave it a little more bite.
Yeah. And the tail, was there anything back there?
That's something a lot of people don't know. On the PBY, This has been modified right at the back.
Uh-huh.
That you can board this aircraft from that right now. During the war, when they initially designed, that was called a tunnel, and there was a gun in there. You would raise it up, slide the gun out. It was a 30 caliber Browning.
Okay. Yeah.
And it did, initially it surprised a lot of Japanese pilots. Sneak up behind the PBY and all of a sudden it's biting at you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic, beautiful airplane.
And do you know where did he fly in the same aircraft? I think you said the one, well, go ahead. The same aircraft or not?
They lost 3. They lost 1 at Pearl Harbor, and they lost 2 others in combat. One of them they got, in fact, it was when they tangled with the Betty bomber. Even though the Betty lost, they were so shot up and running out of fuel that they had to land out in the ocean. And that's where they sat for 72 hours. They were picked up by a destroyer, taken back to Pearl for a new bird, and the destroyer sank their PBY.
And would they crew the same aircraft all the time, the very same one all
As
the time?
long as it was available.
If
yes.
it was available, yeah.
In fact, my dad's was 24 P7. That was the first one he had. That was a PBY 5. And I do have a picture of it.
Any of them survived from his VP-24?
Most of the people did survive.
No, the plane, any of the planes.
Plane? Most of them were scrapped after the war because they're pretty worn out.
Yeah,
They're putting a lot of flight time on them,
right.
taking a lot of damage. Even though it was designed as a seaplane or an amphibian, it didn't like landing in rough water, which it had to do quite frequently to pick up down pilots,
Right.
survivors from a ship that went down. And that was pretty hard on it. Most of all of them, on a mission, they carried a box of 12-inch long wooden spikes. So when they'd come in to land, they'd walk the hull, spot the holes, put these drive the wooden spikes into them until they could repair it. That'd keep it from sinking.
Oh,
Yes. They had actually a pretty weak bottom on them. And they weren't intended for rough water.
let's go around the other side here.
The original unit was BP-44.
Oh yeah? You mean this particular plane?
Pardon me?
This particular plane?
Yeah.
Oh. You know anything about that outfit?
When I first spotted this airplane at the museum, I got a hold of my dad and I gave him the BU number and it's the unit number at the time, which is VP-44.
Yeah.
And he traced it down, and this aircraft was actually initially one of their sister squadrons,
Okay.
VP-44.
Uh-huh.
And they wound up going to the Azores.
Oh.
Yeah, they put them where they needed them.
Yeah. They didn't have as much fun in the Azores as your dad did in the Pacific, did they?
Rough water and cold.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, well, guys, let's go to the back one more time. And that was pilots and stuff got in that way?
Yep.
Or did everybody go in that way? Pretty much.
Most of them went in through here.
Yeah.
A lot of them would go in through the blister.
Yeah.
They're actually doing quite a job. This is not an entrance, it's just a window that
Yes, right.
was put in after the fact.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And you can see the 2 steps to get in through the blister.
Do you know the history of this plane after World War II? Anything about?
No, I really don't. Well, I do a little bit. I know it became a water bomber
Oh, it did.
up in Washington, I believe. And
Yeah.
I believe the museum got it from one of the water bombing units out of Washington.